All right, so yeah, so if you just jumped in, what we're going to be taking a look at here today is the new Resident Evil 4 remake, which they had a demo, by the way, which is really great, so I didn't have to pay for it. So we're going to check out their demo. Wish all games did that, by the way. And then we have The Last of Us Part 1 that just came out for PC, and then Hogwarts Legacy. You guys voted on as the other one that's just really, really like VRAM demanding and all this sort of stuff. As the VRAM Boogeyman has merged as this big behemoth, and funny enough, all the ARC A770 limited editions have sold out on Newegg, which the guys pointed out on the Techonomics podcast yesterday. And that's because it has the 16 gigs of RAM, and you need the 16 gigs of RAM now. That's what we're going to be taking a look at here today. So let's go over the test system. I used, it's actually a pretty good system, but we're using the GTX 980 Ti with 6 gigabytes of VRAM. Bum, bum, bum. And the goal is just to see, can you play the game, right? Like, do you need all the VRAM? So that's what we're going to be taking a look at. So let me get this pulled up and we'll go over the specs real quick. All right, so for this system, I am using the i7-13700K. And the reason why I chose to go with this one is because a couple weeks ago, we had the 12700KF for only $235. So I'm assuming everybody who was in the market for a CPU either bought a 5800X3D if they had AM4 or had bought the 12700KF. And this is going to perform... And this is going to perform relatively close to that. So even though this is a lot more money, I would definitely recommend the 12700KF over this due to its much lower price point. But this is the most comparable thing I have to it on hand right now. For cooling, we have the Enermax Liquimax, whatever, 360 ARGB AIO. It's a pretty good deal, $100. By the way, links are in the video description if you want to pick up any of this stuff. It does the job, and it's pretty cheap. So I like it. I'm using the ASRock Steel Legend Z690 motherboard. I got mine when it was on sale over the holidays for $140. $171 is about what these boards cost. You can also get the MSI A Pro. It's a very similar board, although this one looks a lot cooler. And I've had a very good experience with mine. Memory overclocking is really good. The one thing I will say with Raptor Lake, the ring clock overclocking does not work on this particular board. Works fine on Alder Lake, does not work on Raptor Lake yet. So that's the only quirk that I have. But other than that, it's been a great board. Been using that for a little bit. Now, the main reason why I wanted to go over the specs was because of this. I put up a post the other day. I'm using the Acer Predator Vesta 32 gig 3600 C14 kit. They're on sale right now for only $149. Now you can get the HP V10s, which are also linked in the video description. They're $139. They're $10 cheaper. The main difference, these guys right here do have the temperature monitoring. So these are, this is like the best deal on B-die, dual rank B-die that I've ever seen, and you can get them at great prices. I have this running at 4000 C15, and that comes in at like 43 nanoseconds. All right, and then we're using the Kingston Fury 2 terabyte Gen 4 NVMe. This one does have the dedicated DRAM and goes basically maxes out the Gen 4 bus. These are down to $150. I also know that the GM7000 Acer Predator one, which I also have, it's about the same price. So these are way cheaper. SSDs are getting cheap. If you need that sort of stuff, you know, now's the time to get SSDs and RAM, honestly. And then for the power supply, I've been using the Segotep 750 watt for a while now. They sent one over a couple years ago, and it was really, really good. And then for the 4090 testing, I got the Gigabyte because it has the 16-pin HP V12 thing. And the Gigabyte one, not so good. So I picked one of these up in a pinch because the ATX 3.0 PSUs were very, very hard to come by. And it worked just fine. So completely maxed out 3090 overclocked, or I mean 4090 overclocked, plus in maxed out overclocked 13900K, and it was able to do it just fine. So for $129, I would say it's time to get a power supply that has the 16 pin and call it a day. And then for the case, we're using the Thermaltake Core P3. I'm using the white one, obviously. So if you guys want to pick any of this stuff up, links are down below. It helps support the channel, and I thank you all for your support. So here we go. Get my keyboard and mouse switched over. So let's get to some gaming. So we'll start off with the big elephant in the room. We'll do The Last of Us Part 1, because this is the one that, honestly, this is the toughest one to run. I'm curious what settings you had. Well, we'll go over that after you guys see the gameplay. Because, all right, let's skip the cinematic. Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't crash. Like, literally, it'll crash sometimes when you just, like, tell it to skip. All right, so here's gameplay. So this is the best way to judge something, because you don't know what the settings are. I do. And then we'll go over it. And then that's when we'll reveal the surprise. Playing Last of Us now and have had no issues so far, which is weird. It's been a janky mess for me. All right. Let's do the thing. Hopefully there's not too much screen tearing. Obviously there's no... well, even if I wanted G-Sync, there's no G-Sync on a 980 Ti over HDMI. Now that's a feature that I could not live without anymore. Do you think Nvidia's going to waste money on games? Of course they will. They want more money. They're just not going to lower their margins. It's you either pay what they want or don't. Kind of the way that it goes. Do I have to read this? Go back. All right, this is kind of mostly on Rails thing, so I'm not really paying attention to the game. I'm more reading your guys' chat. CPU temps skyrocketed. Yeah, CPU temps will skyrocket when you do any sort of shader caching or compilation. Nice frame time graph. Yeah, look at that. Look how smooth that is. And that's basically what we're doing. Like, is this playable? Yes, obviously this is playable. Oh no, we're under 60. It's going to happen from time to time. This is just a really, really heavy, stupidly heavy game. I would not recommend playing on a 980 Ti because of that, but look at the frame times. It's perfectly fine. Like, once again, if we had G-Sync, it would be completely unnoticeable. What setting, Chris? 1080p high? We'll go over the settings. If you can't tell the settings, like, does it look good? Does it look bad? I mean... by the way, look at that 980 Ti clock. That's why you don't use the reference models. They don't do that. The cooler is incapable of handling that. Oh, I have to hit the left trigger. It's getting mad at me. Temperatures aren't too bad either on it. It's crazy. Wait, Pascals don't have G-Sync either? Not over HDMI, they don't. Oh, by the way, the E-cores are on. So that actually is one of the reasons why that frame time graph is so smooth. I've noticed that using RPCS 3, it basically, the E-cores take care of the shader caching issues, which is ridiculous. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at next week. We're going to see the difference of E-cores on and off. But from my subjective opinion, just doing some, basically me just fafoing around, it looks like the E-cores almost completely eliminate shader caching issues, which makes them extremely valuable, and that's very interesting to me. Yeah. All right, so I guess we could go into the settings. You guys kind of have a general idea of the performance. It's basically 50 to like 75 FPS. Bounces around in there. So let's go under the options and display. So we're actually running with FSR, because this game is way too heavy. So it's 1080p with FSR quality mode. I wish they had a better mode, but anyways, that's what we had to do. So we're looking at a 720p image, boys. So if you thought it was looking good, 720p might be just about good enough for you. I just want to throw that out there. We're way past the VRAM limitation that it says. So custom preset, we have animation quality on high. Basically, I set everything to low. I used the low preset, set animation quality to high, because that's a CPU thing. And then look at those textures, boys. We're running high textures. We're not running low textures. We got our anisotropic filtering on at 16x. Now, what I found interesting is I started at medium, because I figured medium would work. And then I turned to high, and literally nothing happened. So this is with the second highest. Now, granted, there's ultra. Let's try ultra. I wanted to do this with you. I have no idea what this is going to do. But this thing's saying we're completely obliterating our VRAM. I'm betting this might have issues. But look what happened. We went from 7 gigabytes to 10 for Ultra. Man, that's a waste of resources, but let's try it out. Let's see how this goes. Oh, now we're getting a little bit of stutter in that line, but still not terrible. Let's see how this goes. Frame rate hasn't dropped. That's about where we were, around 50. Maybe a frame or two lower. Oh, all right. So maybe a little bit lower, but look at that frame time graph. We got no stuttering. Oh, New Tech wants me to run with all sorts of stuff. The GPU is not fast enough to run the game, man. It's not a VRAM thing. The GPU just isn't fast enough for this game. So yeah, you know, if you want, you can buy one. They're like $100 and something bucks. I got links down below, by the way. You could test it out all you want, but in reality, the whole point is, even with the max textures on a 6 gig card, that frame time graph is fine. Now, like I said, I wouldn't want to play the game on this card, but let's say you bought this thing back in 2015, 8 years ago, and you wanted to play the game. Well, this is playable. This works. It's not ideal, but I mean, once again, you're using an 8-year-old graphics card. I don't even remember what settings I had on this one. This one actually runs very well, so it's not really an issue. Let's see what we're working with, because I don't even know. All right, so we got 75%. Oh, okay, that's what it's doing. I had it at 1440p, and then I lowered it down to 1080p. I've turned the TAA on high. Apparently that does make a difference. You guys were talking about that in the last video. It does look a lot better. All right, and then the actual graphics settings. Oop. All right, so I just did medium, I think. And I turned textures on high. Just because I'm like, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so yeah, I did the medium preset, textures on high. There we go, that looks right. And the frame time graph, well, if you guys have seen any of my live streams where we did that's just the way this game is. Especially at this part. But overall, if you notice, it's lower than it was in a lot of the other videos, right? And I'm thinking that's the E-core is actually doing a thing. Because that frame time spiking used to be a lot harder. But anyways, as far as Hogwarts goes, this is less interesting than The Last of Us. I mean, if we want, we could just try to go to ultra textures on this one, see if it makes any difference. But high textures on a 6 gig card working just fine. We're, what, 60 to 70 FPS? It's kind of where we're bouncing around. All right, ultra textures, apply. Let's break the card. Look at that, 180 FPS. I think I'm going to start doing some menu benchmarking. I think that's going to be the future. We're just going to benchmark the menus. Because that's, you know, everybody wants the higher FPS, right? All right, so it started off a little extra jittery, and then it smoothed out, and maybe a little more jittery. A little bit, maybe. Oh, it's hard to tell, because, like I said, this is a little jittery to begin with. But overall, I wouldn't say it's too terribly different in terms of performance. Seems about the same. I'll let you guys be the judge. You're watching. You have eyes. But as far as I can tell, I'd say it's no different from what I can see. All right. So honestly, I don't even remember what I have the settings for on this one either. So let's see what we're actually working with. All right, options. So this one's 1080p, VSync off, obviously. FSR is off. This one's native 1080p. All right, so I cranked up the textures on this one as well. Now, obviously, if you go to the max, this is the highest. They don't go any higher than that. So I was using the second highest textures, and that's what you saw. Because it's a 6 gig card, so use 6 gig textures. I thought that was a pretty smart way of doing it. Even though the game's like, you're using 8 gigs of RAM. All right, so let's go ahead and crank it to the max. We have high. I think it's medium. I think I did a medium preset. And then I turn a lot of the extra graphics crap off. This is how I play games anyway. Like, no lens flares, no depth of field, none of that crap. But yeah, I left the resource-intensive lighting on and resource-intensive effects on. You can turn these off and you can actually get quite a bit performance back. Those actually do a thing. Let's see, bloom, like who needs that? Screen space reflections I'd like, but on something as old as a 980 Ti, it's just not going to be worth the hit visually. Same thing with like volumetrics. Like that's something I would like to have on. The GPU is just not fast enough. But let's go ahead and check out the maximum settings on that thing. Okay, so on this one, we saw a pretty big drop in performance going up from the textures. So this is the first game where the textures actually affect the frame rate. Yeah, that's right. I'm supposed to walk around here. Let me go back outside because that's where the performance is taxed more. In here is not too bad. Capcom's one of the few that manage great visuals and great gameplay. Yes, well, they're remastering old games that are good. Like, the gameplay on this one's just more of a modern update to the controls and stuff. But RE4 kind of made this genre of game. But, yeah, the performance on the RE engine's really good. Because even on the Xbox One and PS4, they had Resident Evil 7 or 6. 7. That one was running at 60 FPS on those really, really weak consoles. And that's obviously, moving forward, a good thing. So, even out here, we're doing pretty good. That frame time is really solid. This is with the max textures on, by the way. All right, so, does the game run? Yes. Can you max out the textures? Yes. Should you do it? No. No, you should not. Okay, so it looks like it was just Steam that crashed. But if you lower the settings just a little bit to high or to, just slightly lower than ultra, everything runs fine. And we saw that. And even if you max it out, it still runs okay. But there's no visual difference. You guys saw me running it at the high 6 gig and then the high 8 gig on Resident Evil. Or on, here, let me turn that off. Or you guys saw me doing, what was it, on Hogwarts. We did high and then ultra. And then on, what was the other game that we did? Oh, The Last of Us. Yeah, we did... what, medium or high, and then we tried the ultra. Visually, you can't see the difference at that low of a resolution. So we did upscaled 1080p, FSR 1080p, and then we did 1080p and 1080p. Visually, the resolution isn't there. And to really notice that, the visual difference, you're going to need 4K anyway. But just for giggles, we went ahead and did it on the 6 gig card, and it still didn't crash frame times on the games that are supposedly the hardest thing in the world to run. Now, if I tried running ray tracing, is that going to completely collapse the card? Of course. Number one, it doesn't have ray tracing capabilities. And number two, ray tracing crashes 4090s into the ground. So just don't turn that on if performance is the goal. I remember The Witcher 3 with its update. Even on the 4090, the frame time graph was a freaking mess. That's why I didn't even use it for my testing. So... if you want everything turned on, the 4090 is your option. If you're okay with turning off things like ray tracing, just knocking down your settings one little notch, your graphics card will be fine. So I think it's a bit of a hubbub, not a whole lot to be worried about, but I'm going to chat with the chat here, see what they're thinking. And then we got Administrator half competing. He's under competing. Thank you so much, buddy. Thank you for the support. So you're half competing. Thank you, my man.